Okay, here is the PowerPoint lecture on education, chapter 17 in the most recent edition of your textbook. You want to take good notes on this stuff, and you will be submitting a copy of your notes for 40 points. And I did add that to the grade book, so you should be able to see that there. So, this goes along with your reading, your assigned reading of chapter 17 on education. Education is something that I happen to be quite passionate about. I've been teaching for 20 years myself, and education is considered by sociologists one of the most important social institutions. You guys spend the vast majority of your waking hours in school or dealing with something that relates to school, whether it's homework or whether it's sports or something of that sort. And certainly your in-class school time. So I'm just giving you a few quotes. You don't have to know these. I just like to let you see some of these. If we were in a classroom, I would read these to you. We would look at them and talk about it a little bit. But I like some of these quotes. Education is the ability to listen to almost anything without losing your temper or self-confidence. The true purpose of education is to make minds, not careers. And there are certainly a lot of problems with public education. If we were in a classroom and we could discuss openly, I would ask you what you like about public school and also what you do not like about public school. And I imagine I would get a lot of responses, probably some passionate responses about what you don't like about public school. And there certainly are some issues. And there's some good things too, and we'll talk about those. So your definition of education, we're talking about the process by which society transmits knowledge, values, norms, and ideologies, and thus the process of transmitting society's culture to the next generation. Education isn't just simply learning facts, that's part of it, but you're also learning social skills. You're learning about your culture. You learn valuable lessons, life lessons in school. So essentially, you are learning your culture in public school. So again, another quote here. When educating the minds of our youth, we must never forget to educate their hearts. Again, just some inspirational quotes that I kind of like. Now, I want you to think, I know you're not in a class with other students, but I want you to think about, because I may ask you this at some point in the future, some things that you like about your public school experience. There has to be at least one thing. Maybe it's not the academic stuff, but maybe it's the social aspect of school. Some students will say, I don't really like, studying and taking classes, but I really like my friends that I've made in public school. Or I really like playing basketball, or I really like playing sports. And that stuff comes from school. So think about also some things that you don't like about your public school experience. And I'm sure there are several things that could come to your mind. The thing that one of the things that bothers me the most right now about public schools are their emphases on standardized testing. The idea that standardized testing pretty much determines your intelligence, your ability, or a school's overall standing. There's so much importance placed on standardized testing, and we lose a lot of instruction time and other valuable educational time because we're so worried about standardized test scores. That's just my personal opinion. And you may have other things that you could add to this conversation, things that you don't like about public school. So there's good and bad with anything. So just a couple more of those. I like those. Now, some technical stuff here. Schooling, I'm going to adjust my camera just a bit here. Schooling, by definition, refers to the formal instruction under the direction of specially trained teachers. Not anybody can just walk into a classroom and teach. Well, not necessarily. They shouldn't anyway. Teachers have to be trained. They require a minimum level of education in their specialized field or fields. Now, there are three main functions of schooling in the United States. The first one is socialization. Certainly we learn how to get along with other people. We learn how to interact with adults, people who have authority over us. We essentially learn how to exist and be with other people. And these are skills that we carry outside of the school setting and into our adult lives, hopefully. Also, cultural innovation. Wonderful inventions are happening all the time. I am old enough to remember a time before the internet, a time before cell phones. I had what was called a bag phone when I was in college. It was like a phone that you took, that you actually you put in your car, and you could have a conversation with someone in your car. The phone was probably as big as the passenger seat. It was huge, and it cost $1 million a month to have it. And that was a big deal. We've come a long way from dialing a rotary phone on a wall to now having a phone in our hands and at our disposal anywhere that we go. And all of this information, this learning, this knowledge, these ideas about making the world better and more efficient come from things that we learn in schools. Also, social placement. Schools serve this function for us as well. Schools directly and indirectly, fortunately and unfortunately, kind of decide where we land or where we are going to be in life. We could talk about school tracking, which we will later. You have college prep track. Probably most of you are in a college preparatory track. You have a general education track. You have a special education track. It used to be you had a vocational track. And with these tracks come certain statuses, stereotypes, beliefs about how children will turn out based on this placement. Schools also have an uncanny way of sort of placing us into certain status categories, like the rich kids and the poor kids, the black kids versus the white kids, etc., etc., the jocks versus the nerds. And we still kind of have a way of stereotyping kids and young adults in schools. We'll talk about that too. Now, we talked about our definition of education. There were some key terms in that. Values is one of those terms. Values are socially shared ideas about what is right or appropriate. Within our society, we value loyalty, patriotism, religion, education, material objects. We love our things, our phones, our clothes, our cars, our homes. And these values are instilled into us in public education. Certainly our parents, the media, churches, those institutions instill these values as well, but education does as well. The importance of values. Values lay the foundation for understanding attitudes and motivation because they influence our perceptions. Second, individuals enter organizations with notions of what is right or wrong, with which they interpret behaviors or outcomes. Third, values generally influence attitudes and behavior. Also, norms, as I adjust my camera yet one more time here. Norms are accepted ways of doing things or carrying out ideas. Now, when we talked about culture way back at the beginning, we covered some of these terms like values and norms and ideologies, but we're revisiting them just a bit here. Example, it's normative to do certain things. It's not a law that you hold the door for someone who is physically challenged or to hold the door for a lady, but it might be expected. It might be normative to do so. I have a misspelling here, but you can kind of deal with that there. The courtesy wave. It is normative or expected that if you let someone in front of you in traffic, that they at least give you a wave or some kind of acknowledgement, a thank you. If they don't, then you might get a little upset with that. It's not illegal to not wave at someone when they let you in front of them in line, but it's normal or normative that you do so. Leaving a server a tip in a restaurant. It's not illegal to not tip, but it's certainly expected that you do so. So these are examples of norms, and we learn these in school, in the education process. I'm skipping that slide. You don't need to worry about that. Also, a part of that definition of education involved ideologies. Now, these are systems of values and norms together that members of society are expected to believe in and act upon without question. For example, capitalism is an ideology. With capitalism, we value the free marketplace. We value the idea of competition. We value, loyalty to company. We value money, monetary kinds of things. We value material things. And it's normative within our culture that you go to school, that you go to college, that you try to get a job, and that you try to make money. And it's also normative that you try to have enough money to get these things that you value. This all ties into this thing called capitalism. It's an ideology. And the social institution of education enforces this ideology of capitalism, for example. Christianity is another example of an ideology. There are specific, I won't talk about that one here, but it also involves a system of values and norms that we're expected to believe in and act upon. You can see it in public schools. If you put your hand over your heart and you say the Pledge of Allegiance, that is within your public school, you're invoking a part of an ideology that reflects Judaism or Christianity. And I'm going to skip here just a little bit, and we'll end the first video part with this term culture. We've already talked about culture, but culture again is a complete and total way of life for a group of people, and part of the educational process involves again that transmission of culture. You are essentially learning facts, and you're learning things, but you're also learning about your society's culture within the public school setting. We'll call that the end of the first part on the lecture series on education. Thank you.